What is going on, everybody? How are we doing on this amazing Tuesday evening? Tuesday evening. Welcome to episode 2 of the Impact Reality Podcast. Joining me, as always, is the co-hosts, Skiba from Between Realities.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
What's going on, dude? How are you doing? And of course,
pretty good.
Jasmine from VR with Jasmine. What's up, Jazz?
Man, I talked out of order. I was so excited. I'm just going to talk over everybody now. Hi.
That's okay. I just think you should start running the show. You could just do the whole intro.
I should. Okay, wait, hang on. Let's do this over. Hey, everybody. Guess what? It's finally our second episode. It took us a little bit, but we are here. And hello.
Eric, you're fired.
Is that good?
I'm fired. I'm out. I'm gone already. Episode 2, I've already lost my job. I'm good with that. I already do way too many podcasts. My wife would be extremely happy. Guys, this is exciting. This is episode 2, and we actually have our first ever guest on Impact Reality Podcast.
I don't think we have any sound effects yet, do we? So
well,
I'll make
we need
one.
them. Eva, do you have anything?
I don't have. I mean, I got like some random stuff. Like there's an air horn, I guess, and maybe some crickets.
Crickets are good.
I could do a voice like this, and I can do some of the show like that.
It's so exciting.
That's the only thing I got.
Pre-puberty match.
We have Steve Votov from ALVO, man. How are you doing tonight?
Yo, what's up? Thanks for having me, guys. It is truly an honor to be your first guest. So, muchas gracias. And yeah, I'm doing good. Ready to talk some VR, I suppose.
All right.
Yeah. So Steve is our very first podcast guest, as you already mentioned. He works with Outside In Entertainment on the game ALVO. I'm sure y'all are familiar. We actually met Steve for the very I did, at least. I don't know about you all, but I met Steve for the very first time at oh shoot. Oh no, I'm blinking out. What was it called?
It was GDC.
GDC?
GDC.
Game Developer
Conference. Oh my god. You know what? Like a lot happened at that event, so it's fine. I mean, don't remember a lot of it, I think. Anyway, Steve, hi. So let's just get right into it. Let's just talk to you because you have so many things to talk about. So you have a super interesting background. Let us know, like, how did you come into the gaming industry, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, were you a gamer growing up? And yeah, just let us know what got you into VR too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was nice meeting you guys at Game Developer Conference, putting faces and everything else with, well, I guess I've seen your faces before, but just meeting you in person and getting to see that beautiful goatee of Skiva's. I'm really jealous.
It's really good.
So
I love all that, all you see. So
yes. Yes, I've been a gamer pretty much all my life. I can remember first gaming experience. Kindergarten, 1989. George Bush was running against Michael Dukakis for president, and I got the combo on Super NES of Super Mario Brothers, the Power Pad, and Duck Hunt. I can't remember the Power Pad game, the name of the game.
Track and Field.
And Track and Field. There you go. Crap. And you'd run on it and you'd jump off of it to cheat and jump back on, all that. Yeah, so that was when I first started playing. From there, I played quite a bit. I was into a little bit of computer games, but mostly console games. Graduated to Sega Genesis, Mortal Kombat. I'm trying to remember my favorite games on Sega Genesis.
Mortal Kombat.
My favorite system. That's probably Sega Genesis, or maybe, I don't know, Sega Genesis, or maybe the original PlayStation 1 is like, those are systems I fell in love with. I love the Genesis. Such a good system.
Yeah, Genesis was good. Unfortunately, the Saturn and the Dreamcast and all that did not really pan out for them.
I know, so sad.
Yeah, but of course, Sony came into the mix, and I've been pretty much a Sony for the most part. I've had all the consoles, Xbox, Nintendo, but the PlayStation always was the one that I just kind of gravitated towards. PlayStation 1, Twisted Metal, Warhawk. I can remember being my big games, Jumping Flash, freaking WWE, the arcade game one where you had Doink the Clown and it like looked realistic, kind of like the Mortal Kombat style. It's really into that. Then PlayStation 2, playing, I can't remember the the games aren't sticking out in my head that I played. Probably the next generation of Twisted Metal. It's a lot of Tekken. I think that's when I got into the fighting games. And then came PlayStation 3, and I can remember I wanted to, and I think at the time when they first came out, they were hard to get, like they have been with 4 and 5. And all I know is I had a Dreamcast and a Nintendo 64, and I wanted that PlayStation 3 so bad that I traded those along with like $300, like the retail value of it, to somebody for a used one. And then I don't know, like 2 weeks later, the dang thing got stolen. So that kind of sucked.
Oh, no way.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You'd be heartbroken if that ever happened. Oh my God.
Man, I remember the PlayStation 3. It was tough to get, and the original one was had a PlayStation 2 chip in it too, if I remember correctly, and could natively play PS2 games and PS3 games. It was a great console. It had like all kinds of memory card slot readers, and it was like one of the beginning consoles for entertainment, like Netflix. You could actually get a Netflix game disc and put it in, and then watch Netflix on your PS3. It was like the beginning of the streaming stuff. It was awesome.
Yeah.
You guys, I have to tell you a funny story about PlayStation 1. I don't think I've ever told the story at all. But when I was younger, growing up, we had my sisters and I had a PlayStation 1. It was the only console we had, and we played Frogger on that thing forever.
Frogger on PlayStation 1?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
That's just like one of my first memories of playing like video games outside of Minesweeper. Anyway, my sisters and I used to fight all the time, of course, when we were younger. And I don't remember what happened exactly, but my sisters and I were fighting, and someone somehow pushed me onto the PlayStation 1. I fell on it, and it shattered, and they were so mad at me. It was the only console we had, the only gaming thing, and it was destroyed. And I was like, well, it's your fault. Like, you pushed me. And then, that was a whole nother fight.
Oh, man. Like broken video games.
Insane.
Dang it.
That is insane. It's funny.
Yeah, they were fragile. They were fragile. Like you remember how the top of it like opened up, and if you weren't careful, that lid could come off.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they're fragile.
Those were the days.
Yeah, I mean that was the first system that had I think that was the first system that had like the CDs, right?
It was I mean, unless you
Sega CD.
Sega CD, yeah.
Yeah, like the add-on, right? Like it wasn't even like yeah.
Man, do you remember that there was a game I think for Sega CD called Sewer Sharks? And it was like live. It was a blend of live video with video games, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was just so realistic and crazy. It really like showed me where games were going, because up until then we had we had the N64 and stuff like that, but then there was no like real video type of stuff until the PlayStation hit the scene. But this was pre-PlayStation, so good stuff.
Yeah. And I don't know if that was the game on there that was like, if you look back on it now and you watch the video, it looks super corny, but it was like there was a game on there that was really violent, and that was clearly for like much older audiences, and it was before the rating system was out there, and it was right at the time. It was that combined with, I want to say, like the release of the original Mortal Kombat that kind of pushed Sega into leading the way and setting up those age ratings on their system. And it was like when Mortal Kombat and was coming out on Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis, the Sega guys, they wanted to have blood in it like the arcade game, but I can't remember if I think that there was too much of a controversy that they didn't want to do it, even though I think that age rating they were just starting to come out, so they made that exception to essentially put in the code to have the blood code.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Super Nintendo had like it was either gray or green blood when you were fighting in Mortal Kombat. I remember, and I remember playing that, going, "What the heck? Get me over with Genesis. This is ridiculous."
Gosh, I can't remember if the blood code enabled the fatalities or what. But man, that game was good. That
I love
Killer
Mortal Kombat.
Instinct, which came out shortly after it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jay Barr is in chat, and he's saying 3DO. He remember the 3DO.
Yeah,
And remember Wing
Panasonic.
Commander. Wing Commander was an amazing. That was when video games, like Skiva said, you had video game play, but you also had live action play. And I think Mark Hamill from Star Wars was in Wing Commander.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right. The Panasonic 3DO. I can remember the only time I saw one of those was at the mall at a Software Etc. Back before it. I don't know if that place turned into GameStop or what happened to it, but it was like at the time like $400 or $500. Like just way more expensive than the Genesis, and maybe the 32X was coming out at that time. And I think the game that they demoed was Wing Commander. And of course, it blew you away, and it had the CD-ROMs.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy, but didn't really take off, and that's because Sony had their stuff cooking.
I love Wing Commander, man. They had a whole bunch of Wing Commander games too, and I think I even remember the name of the the evil enemy was like the Kilrathi. I think was or they look like big space cats. It was such a cool game. But Mark Hamill being in that game just geeked me out completely. I have to play that game.
I know. For real. Mark Hamill was the man back then. He was Luke Skywalker, man. He was a Jedi.
Hell yeah,
that's rad.
and then he was like gone forever.
Yeah.
And then he was in the new Star Wars, and then he's back around. He's great in the new Star Wars.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. So like just to get back to your question about the evolution into VR, the idea of virtual reality like always excited me. Ever since the viewfinder days, and anything that I could see in 3D, even if you look at those old Magic Eyes where you stare at it long enough and the 3D image pops out, or your cheap things that are sold at like flea markets where they have like a 3D eagle somehow, something like that. There's all kinds of little 3D tricks with your eyes with the stereoscopic stuff, and I knew whenever I could afford it, I wanted it. I couldn't at the time when they were first coming out with the Oculus. I didn't have a high-powered PC, didn't have the money to get into that, but I was on the verge of taking the leap. I think from PS3 to PS4. At the time, there was all that news about, is Microsoft going to get in? Are they not going to get in? And I kind of held off and waited to buy my PS4 until I found out for sure that Microsoft wasn't getting in, and PlayStation VR was around the corner, and I knew then. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get a PlayStation 4 for sure. I want to say shortly before I bought the PSVR that I tried, just the Google Cardboard. Simply, I'm just walking around my office.
No way.
Yeah, I'm walking around my office with the Google Cardboard, just showing everybody. It's like, look at how cool this is, man. And they're like, yeah, it's cool. And it obviously wasn't great, but it was like my first glimpse at what that VR was.
It's funny how it changes for some people. Remember showing people back in the day, you were like, man, this is amazing. And then some people would put it on, and they would go, yeah, it's okay. But then the diehard VR people, because they put it on, they're like, oh my God, this just changed my entire freaking world.
Yeah, that was me for sure. I tried it on and I was like, this is so cool. How did they do this? Why can't I move my head with this cardboard? And all of a sudden, like this, oh my gosh, I was so mind blown. It was so cool. And after that, I was like, I gotta get into VR.
The thing with the Google Cardboard that really blew me away is I remember taking a lot of spherical photos with my phone, where you could build the sphere photos and then just big 180 photos, and then being able to go into Google Photos on Google Cardboard and just like feel like I was back to where I took those pictures, and it was like a little transport machine to bring me back through my memories, and it was pretty rad. That was the thing I think I liked most about the cardboard days.
Steve, I love how I asked you, so were you a gamer growing up? And you were just like, yes, 1,000. Let me just tell you the history from point A to Z through, I don't know, some other imaginary alphabets. You were definitely a gamer from the start.
Yeah. I feel like the games I played were probably the popular ones that everybody else played all along the way. I never really got into like RPGs or too many puzzle games. I liked action, and I liked graphics, basically. And but honestly, like even with it, when the end of PS3 and the beginning of PS4, it was like I was getting older. My time became more limited, and I would get the newest games, Grand Theft Auto, the newest GTA, the newest Red Dead Redemption, God of War, and hardly any of them could hold my attention. Really about the only ones towards the end of it, right before I got VR, the PSVR, the one that finally could hold my attention was Battlefield 1.
Nice.
First person shooter, and I'd played a number of ones before, but that was, other than a little bit of Halo, that was the first time I just got like deep into online first person shooters. And I really like historic. I really enjoy history, and that, just looking at all the World War I stuff, I thought was real cool. So I got into those first person shooters, and then and that was the only game that could really hold my attention. But finally, I got the PlayStation VR, and once I got into a first person shooter on that, it just kind of took it to another level. Honestly, like I was a fucking kid in a candy store, something like that.
I know, and shooters are so good in VR. They translate so well. I mean, it's like a classic way to, like, be able to hold the weapon, be able to shoot, in virtual reality, doing it in real life, aiming down sights. It's one of those VR things that just works really, really well. So, I mean, it was one of the first things that I went to. I remember playing Pavlov, almost like right away, or, some of the early ones, like, there was some VR games in VR early on called Standout. It was not a really good game, but it was like the only battle royal you could play, back then. It's actually still around, but
it is. People still play
around.
it.
Standout, War Dust,
Raptor Labs. They make those games, man.
Yeah, and they got that GTA style game. I can't remember the name of it.
Gang V.
That thing's a bit of a train wreck, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the other draw to the first person shooters and the online was just the social component of it.
Mm-hmm.
The camaraderie that you build, being on teams or just talking smack to other people. And then, when you get that sense of presence with VR, it just amplifies the things that I thought were really appealing to me anyways in video games.
So there's a big difference in like playing games and being like, wow, this is amazing. This is what a cool game. These games are kind of sucking up my life, to actually going out and saying, I'm going to make a game. At what point were you like, all right, this is it, man. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to make a game. It's going to be rad. Let's go.
Yeah, I guess it kind of started as, I guess maybe I saw just an idea, and maybe I saw a little bit of what I perceived at the time as like a gap in the market, combined with just I guess a willingness to take risk with what little bit of money that I had, and then some people who believed in me that said, okay, yeah, maybe you're onto something. Let's give it a try. But I mean that, and it wasn't, to tell you the truth, right at the beginning, there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. It was just like, okay, let's let's put a little money on this and see where it goes at first. And so I had no background other than just being a diehard gamer and somebody that was into a lot of video games, and into VR. But I'm sitting around on PlayStation VR. I'm playing Firewall 0 Hour all the time, just like religiously. Before that, I'd played Farpoint, thought it was real cool. But I'm playing Firewall 0 Hour religiously. The aim gun is like the coolest thing in the world to me.
Yeah, it is.
And it seems like, there's a ton of people playing this game. Everybody that was playing it was enjoying it. I seldom found anybody. It was like, oh, I don't like this game. And I thought, it's okay. It's the first part. This Firewall was, of course, like a great game, as close to, AAA as, there's kind of been in a first person shooter up to this point. So the graphics were good and all that, but just first person shooter itself. And I'm like, oh, there's 3 to 5 million at the time. I think they had sold 3 to 5 million headsets, and this is like late 2018, 2019. 3 to 5 million headsets. There's only one first-person shooter over here, where on the PC VR side, your total install base amongst, at that time, Vive and Rift were really the only two ones in the game. Like the install base between those was probably lower than what the install base of PlayStation VR was at the time. And you had, 3 or 4 games out over there that were all first person shooters. And I said, well, it doesn't look like those games are coming to PSVR anytime soon. And I kind of, in a way, I thought of it. I thought that because I didn't think that they were going to want to change their mechanics or take the time to make the game for PlayStation VR, where it would have to be based on the aim controller, and because those move controls, you just couldn't really do a manual reload with it, even though we tried our best at the later stages of our game. And so I'm sitting around playing that game. I'm following all these games. I'm sitting on Reddit PlayStation VR religiously, and I'm searching YouTube and Googling, and I'm following all these games that are supposedly in development for PlayStation VR. The two that I had really found that I thought had a chance of coming was, at the time they said Zero Caliber was supposedly in development for it, and then this game ALVO, and ALVO had a trailer that had been on the YouTube, that had been on the PlayStation YouTube, that was real good. The trailer looked good, although it didn't really show anything that looked VR specific. It all looked like CG generated, but what the heck did I know? I had never been in any sort of video game development. For all I knew, that baby was ready to go. And it also was, supposedly going to be crossplay with PSVR. And so I read on Reddit PlayStation VR that ALVO had been canceled due to a lack of funding. And it's like 1:00 in the morning.
What year was this, Steve? Well, because it was announced, I think it was announced in 2017 that it was coming, right? So what year did you see that it was going to be canceled?
I want to say it was like maybe October of 2018.
Wow. Okay.
It was late 2018. And I'm sitting around, it's like 1:00 in the morning. I'd been playing Firewall. I read that on Reddit PSVR that had been canceled. And I said, well, dadgummit, I think that there's a market for it. I was wanting to play this game, and I think there's a market for it on Reddit PlayStation VR or on PSVR. And I said, why don't I just, they lost their money. Why don't I just contact the guy and see how much money it would take to get this thing, to get involved in this somehow. So I look up, drill down. It's Martin Poole, a developer based out of Canada, who had some other games, one that was on PlayStation. I didn't know anything about him. I just contacted him, and he pretty much emailed me right back, 5 minutes after I shot him the email at 1:00 in the morning. And I was like, hey man, I might want to try and fund this game. I read that you lost development, that you lost that money. Let's talk. And he's like, whoa, are you serious? And I call him. We talk right then, and he's like, yeah, I had some people that I'd been funding the game out of pocket, paying my workers out of pocket, and there was another group that was supposed to be there's kind of almost like an early VR venture fund that, as I understand it, may have funded some of the the early almost like publications out there for VR, and he's basically yeah, they pulled out, they got scared, and they don't want to fund it anymore. And I think this was kind of right after that first kind of peak where it was Oculus sales weren't doing real great, and they kind of got scared out of it. But as Oculus sales weren't doing great, PlayStation VR sales were doing a little bit better. It wasn't an iPhone or anything like that at that point, but it was clear that they somebody wanted it because PlayStation VR was still selling. And he said, well, it's going to take X number of dollars and we can get it out in X amount of time. It ended up taking, by the time it was all said and done, it ended up taking probably 3 times the amount and 3 times as long. And you should
have figured that one right up front, man.
Yeah, and that's it's no fault of his. I think he truly thought that he could get it out, for that dollar amount in that amount of time. But come to find out, it's not easy. And So he's like, well, actually, I just, if we want to get this thing out anytime soon, he's like, I actually just had to let the whole team go because I didn't have any more money. He's like, if we want to get them back on the project, they're gonna move on and find other jobs here real quick. So if we want to keep this thing, if we want to get it going, we need to get them some money ASAP. And at that point in time, and again, this is like the day after I talked to him, literally. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I got to find my investors, and I got to have an investor agreement, and you and I got to have a publishing agreement. So I got a lot of other stuff to do, and I had a FaceTime call with them because I wanted to look them in the eye. I was like, but you know what, the hell with it, and I wired him like $7,000 to Canada, just gentleman's agreement. Like there wasn't any paperwork, anything else. Like it was like me saying, okay, look, I'm serious about this. Hopefully don't screw me over and take my money. And he didn't. And so we start working on it. And I guess maybe, so I call up. Feel like I've just been talking here forever, and anybody asks me how
this is an awesome freaking story, man.
This is a podcast, dude.
I'm glad you're talking, man. This is a passion for you. I love this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've told it a million times, not to a lot of folks like yourself, just to like random people I'm like, yeah, I develop a video game, and people are, what? How'd you get into that? We're at a PlayStation VR. People think I'm crazy, but so let's see. Oh yeah, here, this is kind of, I thought this, when looking back on it, it's kind of funny, and some of the relationships I developed are kind of cool. So I'd sent him that money, but I was about to commit to a much larger amount, and that larger amount ended up coming from a combination of my family. Mom and dad invested a little bit, my sister and my brother-in-law invested a little bit, and then I had two friends who my background prior to kind of being in this little venture here was I was a stockbroker. I worked as a financial advisor where I would help people invest their 401ks and invest money that they had sitting in bank accounts, whatever. I was a salesperson helping them get into investments. And luckily enough for me, I had done all right with whatever money I had invested. I wasn't making millions or anything like that, but I had a little bit of money. And my buddies had a little bit of money. And they said, yeah, they're like, we don't believe in the idea because it sounds kind of crazy, but I guess they kind of believed in my passion for it and whatever I had said to convince them that there was actually a market for it on PlayStation VR. So I sent him that $7,000, but I was about to sign a contract to send him a lot more than that, in the long run, plus in the short term, there was another 10 or 20 grand coming up right around the corner. And I said, I got to see what you got, because all I've seen at this point is your trailer. And he's like, yeah, okay. If you get an HTC Vive or a freaking Oculus Rift, we'll send you a build. You can check it out in Unity. I said, okay, great. I don't have either of those. I wasn't ready to buy the computer to do it just then. And so I had to find somebody in my area that had one. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I get on, first I don't know, I post on like the Reddit Vive and Rift. I'm like, anybody happen to be in North Carolina that can help me view a game? I get no hits there, but I found this VR meetup group, just a local group of people that were passionate VR people, and I call the guy who's essentially like the leader of it, and he says, yeah, I've got one for you, and I met with him and another fellow who at the time, I can't remember where he was working at the time, but somebody had a Vive. I looked at it, and it looked like in the headset. I was telling myself, and part of my agreement with the original developer was, by the time this is said and done, we're going to have maps that look as good as Firewall 0 Hours maps. And that was a lot. Looking back, those maps looked fantastic and everything else. but the maps that I looked at visually, I was like, okay, this ain't Firewall 0 Hour, but maybe it's 50% of Firewall 0 Hour in terms of the graphic fidelity. And all I essentially did was like go in and like with one gun play on one map against bots. In my mind, not knowing anything about development, I was like, okay, if we've got, 3 more maps like this and maybe we're going to build 2 more before release, I was like, this game's maybe 60 or 70% there. And in retrospect, it was probably like 5% there, if that. We had the maps, but the foundation of it, we had the maps and we had a few guns in the programming that goes along to do that, but there was no networking code. And in a multiplayer game, the networking code is the bulk of the work, or at least a lot of it. So needless to say, that's what led to 3 times the amount, 3 times as long to get it out there. But funny, the guy that actually the very first person I ever met in Charlotte that had showed me the game, I actually have a good relationship with him. He ends up working right now. He works for a headset manufacturer, and I actually saw him at GDC. We met up out there, and it was awesome. It's like a crazy small world that I was able to meet up with him out there in San Francisco. And when I got in. And also, like I would say, when I got into it, I really thought that I was going to do 2 things: that I was going to invest, and that I was going to provide, a little bit of creative direction. And it turned out to be a ton more. It turned out to be way, way more work, and also ups and downs emotionally as like I'm watching this thing that's taking. Sucking, it's like a year into it. I've already put in everything that I had initially committed, and we can barely, we're not playing it on PlayStation VR yet. We're playing it on Rift, and I've got people, and we bring in beta testers. I was like, yeah, man, I need some people with Rifts that can help us play this game. And I'm like, look, beta testers, understand that right now, the game is built to run on the PlayStation aim controller, which means you're not going to be taking your hands off the gun. Oh. And I tell that to people, and they're like, why can't I take my hands off the gun? Like, dude, well, that's not what it's designed for right now. It's designed for the PlayStation aim controller. Maybe we'll get there, and so that's like, it's frustrating to like get that sort of feedback from people, and that's like a whole other thing with like the psychology and communication with beta testers, which I still haven't really got right. But luckily, I did find some people that had PCVR that also had PlayStation, and they've been playing Firewall, and they said, "Oh, we see exactly what you're doing." And the few that those guys, we brought them into our inner circle. Within Discord, and they've been instrumental. It turned out the community has been kind of like the driving factor in keeping this the development of the game, what we've been doing with all our gameplay mechanics, but personally for me, just the motivation to keep going, because there's been like a number of times where I'm like, man, I can't do this anymore, especially before release. And the guy's like, look, man, you got something here. You got a great game. Let's see it through. Let's just get it to the PlayStation VR release. And, finally, once we did, shortly after that, we got all our money back, and we were, in pretty decent shape to, just continue development. I hadn't struck it rich,
but how scary though? Like how scary that must have been. You were 2018. You did this. You did this investment. You invested 3 times more than you thought you were going to, and 3 times as much time. You don't release until April 13th of 2021. Like that had to be scary as hell. Like putting all your money, putting more than you thought you were going to put in, triple what you thought you were going to put in, and then having to wait, that much time to see the game actually come out. And then you still don't know how well it's going to be received, right? Like, you don't know, even when you launch, you have that launch and you're like super happy that it just got out, but you still don't know exactly. You think you have a great game, but you don't know how it's going to be, received until it does. And then when it does hit and it's a critically acclaimed, then you must be like a huge sigh, or weight must have been off your shoulders at that point.
Yeah, it was. And, like, at that point, 2 to 3 years into it, it was like I was pot committed. It was like, it's like there's no going back. I got to, I'm playing it on the beta on PlayStation VR finally, and it's looking really rough at the first stages of the beta. And I want to say we kept it in like a closed beta for it might have been 8 months on PlayStation VR because I was just like, this ain't ready for prime time. And of course, our critics would say, oh man, it was a beta when it came out on PlayStation VR1. It's still a beta. It's still in early access. They say that about every game. They say that about a lot of games. But a lot of the beta testers, and again, it's all about that the community has continued to be a prime motivator. It's just like the beta testers are like, yeah, we really like this. We really like this. These things we think need changed, and trying to make those changes. It's all about prioritization of what you think is, super important, what you think you absolutely need to do versus what you want. And there's a million other features and everything else that I'd like to have in the game. I told people for the longest time, I'm not done with this thing until I have jetpacks and flamethrowers. I still don't have them, but by goodness, one of these days I will.
Coming.
And it's coming. And frankly, it's, I think the step that'll get us there is finally having it where we can have people mod it on the PCVR side. If there's one of the main things I would have done differently up to this point, it would have been to try and get it into some state to where, whether it was released on PCVR or not, but to have it ready for people to mod it, because I can see how much I can see essentially, like with the other games that are out there that have the mods, how much basically free shit they're getting from people.
Yeah, it's like free work when you have a modding community that makes all these maps and all these amazing things that you can do in there. Look at Contractors. How much more stuff is in Contractors because of the modding?
Oh yeah, there was. I mean, Contractors were starting to kind of fizzle out, and all of a sudden the modding community, the modding came in, and it just picked right back up, maybe to its highest point that it's ever been, and it was just an incredible rise.
When you throw in the Star Wars IP, and you just have it all right there, the sound effects, the characters, the maps, and everybody wants that. So
True
I don't know if we'll get I don't know if we'll go that route, because I'd be concerned that I'm going to get sued. But but even if you're not using another company's IP, the maps that like you've seen created for Pavlov and for Onward, that are just, totally original maps that people make, they're really good. There's a lot of them that are really good. And knowing like how diehard our community is, and how like we're just what I would say is like very indie, because like I think we would have latched on to that. It would have served us well, and I regret not having have done it, but we're working on it real hard right now to have it in a modding state.
Before we get to off topic and changing, like you just told a crazy story. And by the way, you just told us so casually, like, oh, I was just playing games and I was on Reddit and I saw this game was coming out and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then they said, actually, we're not coming out with this game. And you're like, actually, I'm going to just whatever. I've never made a game before. I'm just gonna fund this game. Let me just email, and actually let me just ask every single person I freaking know to to help fund this game that you're so passionate about. Steve, that is crazy. That is a crazy story. That is the definition of a diehard fan, and definitely what the entire VR industry is built on is passionate people like Steve who are crazy enough to just go all in on something they've never done before, all because he was like, I want to play this game on PSVR1. That's crazy. That's amazing.
Yeah, it kind of just snowballed and started to have. It just had the momentum, and it just kept going and kept going, and it keeps going. And it's freaking, I don't know how many years into this thing now. If that was late 2018, 4 to 5 years into it, and we are still we're at it harder than we ever are before. Basically,
I feel like we should just throw in some emojis in the chat, respect. So much respect, Steve. That is wild. That
We've
is
all seen
absolutely
games we love
crazy.
die. You know how many
Yeah.
VR games that I've been like, I've been in VR games that I've played and helped test that have been killed. Those projects have just died, and I was like, I want this game so bad. But I mean, you know, you can't help everyone. But I mean, you found one that you were just like in love with, and you wanted to see it made. You didn't want to see it die, and you actually did something about it. A lot of people out there want to talk a big game, but there's not many people that are actually going out and doing these things.
Buying a big game.
Yeah, right.
They talk
I
a
do
big
find
game,
it
they don't
crazy
buy
that
the game.
you had a PC build before you had a PlayStation VR1 build. How hard would it have been to put a PC build out there at the same time?
It would have been real hard because, you know, we had a button press reload, you know, and we had you know, the grenade with, you know, we were kind of doing what Firewall was doing, where the grenade came off the arc of the gun. Like, we knew the mechanics that we had built at that point had no independent hands, and there was a lot of work that had to be done to move from just having this one thing that's tracked to having the independent hands. And we've taken it and we've, you know, gone through a number of stages with it, but with, you know, basically 1.0 being, you know, what the independent hands, if you will, 1.0 being right as we released on Oculus Quest 2. I just, like, I didn't want to go PCVR because I thought, if we don't have independent hands, it's just going to get butchered. I don't think it's going to sell well, and I could not take the sort of criticism that was going to come along with it. I would say, just like personally for me, like the emotional toll that it takes when you're seeing, and I should have just never even like looked at a single YouTube comment or anything else that people say, and I'm sure you guys know about that. But like the toll that it takes when you see people criticize your stuff, and it really is true what, you know, those Joe Rogan says. If you go and look at people's comments, it's like you can have 100 positive things, but one person says a negative thing, and it just breaks your freaking heart. So I couldn't take that criticism, and I knew the PCVR. I knew they were a lot more. They're die hard, and their expectations were different, and I just knew that I could not release it with, you know, the same controls that we had for the PlayStation aim controller. But I feel much better about a PCVR release of the game in the near future. I think we've honed it enough that I think they work, and I think it's fairly unique, and that I'm hopeful there's going to be some of those folks that are receptive to it. Basically,
I think you're right. Remember Solaris? Solaris came out from who made it? Was it the makers
First Context?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they did Solaris, and that was one of the early things on the magnet hands. Your left hand, you didn't have a left hand because they based everything off the aim controller, and people killed it. Nobody wanted to play it because of that. They're like, "Well, how come I can't have two hands?" So I think you're right. I think it would have been. I think you did a good thing by putting it to the PlayStation VR1, and you know, the aim controller. You know, maybe a lot of people don't know who didn't have a chance to play it. The aim controller was an amazing peripheral. It was one of the best peripherals that PlayStation's ever done, and I would love to see them do another one for the PlayStation VR2. I don't think it'll happen, but that would be pretty amazing. But I mean, ALVO with the aim controllers is pretty awesome.
Do we have the trailer for ALVO? Should we play that for anyone that may have not ever seen or heard of ALVO?
You could look at, you know, an interesting, like, if you want to do a comparison, would be the original trailer, which you could find on Sony's YouTube. If you search ALVO, it'd be the one with the most views, versus like the PlayStation, versus like our release trailer. I mean, frankly, about the only thing that is the same between those two trailers is like one of the maps that you'll see.
Skiba, what do we got? Which trailer do you have?
We have the 2022 trailer that's actually running right now as we speak, and it's beautiful. I mean,
talk us through this game.
Yeah, let me see here. And kudos to, frankly, the guy who made that trailer was one of our community members, a fan of the game. And we have
That's
like I
sweet.
have like we have like a great relationship. He's a basically like a TV producer. It's what he does for a living, and he spent tons of time. It actually still spends a bunch of time like getting community members all along the way. We could not have done it without them in so many different ways. But let me
GT
see.
is in
Yeah.
chat. Gamer tag. He says, "Tell Steve I'll speak to him soon." Great
Yeah.
show. It's almost 2 a.m. here. Take care, everybody.
All right. Take
Later,
care.
Hey, and
Gamer tag.
Jay Barr did ask a
Hey.
question. I don't want to lose it before we get there. Jay Barr said, would you have changed your mind about that investment now that you know what you did? Would you do it all over again?
Oh, man.
Asking the deep questions now.
It was a great question. I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah. Jeez.
He's
just
like, no
just seeing that
comment.
you have to think about it is kind of an answer.
Dude, it's been so much work, and it continues to be so much work. And I guess like I didn't anticipate the emotional attachment that I would have to it. You know, the investments that I did in the past, you know, hey, whatever, I'll buy some Google stock. But
That's not financial advice, by the way. Anyone listening?
yeah. Well, I was like, the investment advice lots of times was either invest in an index mutual fund or invest in a company that you know, something that you buy. Well, I use Google and Apple, whatever, and Meta. But and I use VR. So I was like, all right, I use VR and maybe I have a chance to get into it. But by the time you ended up with how essentially like most of, the decisions that were made with the gameplay and everything else, like ultimately, there was a ton of feedback and collective decision making, but those decisions ended up being on me. So it's kind of like my baby. And you want to see your baby grow. You don't want to see your baby die. But maybe when that kid's a teenager, you're like, it's time for you to get the heck out of here. I don't know. And it's like, when are you gonna start feeding daddy? When I gotta come home and live with you. I don't know. I would not have. I'm glad I did it. There's a million things that I would have done differently. Man. And we probably had success in spite of ourselves, frankly. Like when I look at, how much money that was blown in different things that, you spend $10,000 on something and it never sees the light of day. There's a whole lot of that. But, at the same time, it's kind of, you look at it and you're like, yeah, I built that. I had a lot to do with it. I ain't the only one. There's a lot of people I would give just as much credit to building this game as myself. Like I don't want to, my guys that have worked on it are incredible, but it does feel good to say that I did it, but it's been a tough road and it continues to be, but I think it's fun though, trying to like create. And as I look forward, I just still have like a list, a million miles long of like all the features that I'd like to like have in ALVO, jetpacks, flamethrowers as whatever, a game mode, but then, just other ideas in VR that I think would be real cool, but everything just takes time and money and it takes more than you think.
Yeah, I was laughing at everything you're saying because it's so relatable. And I know that I'm not the only person here that's feeling this. Literally, probably every single person in chat, all of us have poured so much into the VR industry. And it is, you said, when are you going to feed daddy? Like, yeah, it's like, you give and you give and you give so much. And it does take a lot. I mean, I've never built a game, so I don't know. I'm sure it takes a lot of effort. But all of us here who build like channels, podcasts, companies, like poured our hearts into VR, like it does take so much to do. And then for some reason, you do get like a really weird attachment. Like you said, like other things you've done, you're just like, oh, whatever, I can quit that. But I don't know what it is about VR. Maybe it's because it's such a small community, and maybe it's because I don't really know what it is, but something about VR makes people super attached, super obsessed, and is just like, whatever, I'm just gonna give up my whole life and do everything VR, and that's it.
Games are art. in my opinion. They are massive pieces of art that a team contributes to, and everyone pours their blood, sweat, and tears into them. They spend years and years on these pieces of art and making and bringing their visions to life. And it can be extremely difficult, like you were saying, to have even just one person be like, "This is garbage." And you're like, "Oh man, I just spent my life and so much of my time and taken years off my life for this piece of art that I've made." And so it's hard. It's absolutely really, it's really, really hard to have people criticize things. And, but yeah, it's commendable. It's commendable to believe in something and pour everything you have into it, and just keep going until you get it to where you believe it should be. So bravo to you.
Yeah, because then you have somebody like Puddles 2108 in chat says, "Steve, you have an amazing game.
I know.
Love ALVO."
I know, Puddles.
It's nice because seriously, I mean, as hard as it was for you, you have a great community of people that you have, you and the team have given a lot of enjoyment to. You know what I mean? People, love ALVO, and it's a great game. So, in the end, I'm sure it was a super hard time, and it was maybe a difficult decision to think back about now. But there's a lot of people out there that love the game, and you gave them a lot of enjoyment. So.
They did. There is, man, and like I said, the community itself has been like, when people ask me like, what are some of the best, what are the best things about ALVO, and I would truly have to say the community is ALVO's best feature. They are, and my goodness, one of these days I'm going to make it over to the UK, and I'm going to meet a bunch of because we've got a whole lot of fans, we got a whole lot of players in Europe. It was, for whatever reason, PlayStation VR. There were a lot of European players over there. So our early players, a lot of them were Europeans, and one of these days I'm going to meet them and then have a meetup with some of our folks here in the States. But the community is our number one feature. They're just welcoming. They want people to enjoy the game. Our tutorial's not great, so people are always getting in there asking questions, and our community members are usually happy to help them out. And they're just fun. People get on, and for the most part, they don't take the game too seriously. They talk smack. Every now and then you'll get a bad apple, and we try and moderate that to whatever extent we can. I'm not the freaking word police, but in general, it's a real good crowd. They're great. So we're pushing forward, and we hope to expand that potential, user base even further. Right now the game's on PlayStation VR1, it's on Quest 2, it's on the Pico headsets. ALVO's in China. I don't really know much about what's going on in China. There's a little bit of I can't quite tell, but hopefully the Chinese are enjoying it. And we're going to get it out for the PlayStation VR2 people sooner than you'd think. And PSVR is right on the horizon with some of the improvements that we've made for PlayStation VR 2. So
yeah, that's kind of like, that's some cool news, because the experience that you get now in ALVO is not the same experience you had when you started on PlayStation VR1. So like, that game is not the same game that you see now. You guys have put a ton into it since that launch on 2021. You have launched on MetaQuest in 2022. You have launched on Pico, but you just haven't ported the exact same game over. You've changed things. You've added to the game. You've put more into it. There's more maps. I mean, tell us a little bit about how much it's different now. Than maybe somebody tried it on PSVR early on and didn't go back to it. Tell them about it now. Why would they want to go back to it now? What's different?
Yeah, sure. So let's say one, if you had never tried our zombies, our co-op zombies, they are a lot of fun. They're super fast paced. I mean, if you could picture yourself, zombies coming at you, you jump over them and you slice them with a flaming machete, or you slice them with a flaming machete and then you grab your double barrel sawed-off shotguns and shoot them. It's a fairly unique, I think, way to play against those zombies, because it's a lot about the movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the let's see, what did we? There's a massive progression system that we didn't have when we first came out on PlayStation VR1. Some people don't like the progression system. They just want to like start a round and earn cash throughout the round and unlock everything as the round goes on. I don't know. I'm still torn on which one I think is better, but it does give folks something to strive for, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there with the progression, unlocks of new guns and scopes and sights and lasers and perks. We didn't have perks when the game first came out. So, you can have a bulletproof vest. You can have, a suicide grenade when you die. And quite a few maps we've added since the beginning. I want to say there's maybe 5 or 6 new maps since we first released, and there's some more maps along the way. And then there's all the mechanics that we added around finally having independent hands and not having the only way to play with the aim gun. So we have manual reload and manual grenades, and it's ultra fast. And I think where I would say specifically that the game was most definitely shaped for what I feel like the better is how we, took what we built for the PlayStation VR aim gun. There were certain things that we couldn't, we weren't worried about intricate manual. We weren't worried about, reloads that much with PlayStation aim gun because they were just going to press a button. So instead we focused on, well, let's try other things that we're not really seeing done in the other games, like the jumping and the sliding and the prone. And I guess maybe it's more about, okay, well, what are we going to try and simulate that the other games either didn't do because they can't simulate it, or they did it, or what can we do differently via simulation that they're trying to do with their hands? And we can, simulate a manual reload. We can simulate a reload with a button press, but you can't very well, very well jump, like we're jumping anyways in another game right now. You can slide, but you certainly can't slide around corners, and you can try and prone. And I know the other games do have prone, but like with us, you can go from prone to jumping in a half a second. That's going to be a little bit hard. So there's just a lot of things that we are simulating, and we've tried to. Now we're still simulating a lot, but we're not simulating the reload. But our gameplay, like the gameplay, is so fast that I wanted to make sure that the reload would also be real fast, but also hopefully fulfilling and somewhat realistic. So, the mechanics on the reload I think they're pretty tight. I'm really proud of it. And I think it's kind of, I'd argue, underappreciated in the Quest world because we didn't have it when the game we had like this hybrid reload that wasn't very good at all when we first released on Quest, and the diehard reload guys, you get in these small niche. This is probably this is your audience. Some of these guys, these hardcore gamers, hardcore VR shooter guys, and the initial crowd that got it was like, I don't want the button press reload, and your manual reload's garbage, F you. And I knew at release, like I knew we needed a better manual reload, but we needed to get the game out there at that point. Like we had to get it out because whatever, I made a money and we need some money coming in. And but eventually, we still knew that manual reload was important, and we built it. And I'm really proud of it now, and I think it's a lot of fun. That's generally how I play. But I can also, and everybody was like, oh, if you have button press, just to be clear, you can play ALVO via button press. So if you want to have a gun stock and never take your hands off the gun, which is a pretty solid way to play it. It's got that it's got B haptic support and the Pro Tube stock support. It's a pretty solid way to play it. That's PlayStation VR aim experience. Or you can play it with taking your hands off the gun and reloading, but everybody's like, oh, if you're reloading with a button press, that's going to be so much faster, and you're going to have this big advantage over the manual reloaders. But that's certainly not the case. Like right now, the manual reload guys are getting it done a lot faster. The stock guys maybe have a little bit more control of the gun because, they're not quite shaking as much. So,
and you have to wait for an animation, right?
It's leveled out.
Yeah, because
Yeah, and you
even
gotta
if you
wait for the
button press, you
animation.
got so it's time thing. I played it both ways. I don't see that it's any faster to do it, with a button press because you have to wait for the animation. And when you manual reload, you control how fast you do it. If you get real fucking good at it, you can be really, really fast with a manual reload.
Yeah, you
But
can.
it takes work.
And I suppose we could. Yeah, it does. And I suppose we could speed the animations up, but so far it seems that there hasn't. The community's not saying it's one way is getting that big of an advantage over the other, and so people are playing it however they like, and that that's not it. That doesn't seem to be an issue with one versus the other. And yeah. So that's it. So the game was shaped a lot in how quickly how we made it so that manual reload is still real quick but tight, because we wanted people to be able to focus on, oh, okay, well this guy's going to come around a corner. Am I going to jump out of the way? What am I going to do? There's a lot of movement in the game, basically.
I love the speed of the game. To me, it's Call of Duty. Like there's no other game that I know of in VR that is as fast as and moves as well as ALVO. Like, to me, the whole idea of the slide mechanic. I mean, you can slide and jump around a corner and pop up and jump around a corner and jump shot somebody. You can't do that in Contractors. You can't do that in Pavlov. You certainly can't do it in Firewall. And I think that was the biggest difference when you came out. Was ALVO, Firewall is a very slow-paced game, just like Onward is. Even some of the other ones, even Contractors, to me, is not as fast as ALVO. So, I mean, this serves, it hits a nerve for a lot of people, because there's a ton of Call of Duty players out there that want that fast-paced gameplay and the perk system that you have. Like, you're still one of the only ones that does a perk system.
Yeah. And I'd like to expand on that a ton, to tell you the truth, with the perk system, and it's on a list a million items long. It's kind of interesting. Literally, when the game was first designed and the maps were designed, and certainly when I came into it, and probably for the first 6 to 12 months of all the development I had been involved in, there was no plans for sliding, jumping, proning. There was no plans for any of that. Like, the maps weren't really, at least initially, designed around that. It was designed to be, basically like a CS:GO clone, more or less like Pavlov with an aim controller, if you think about, like, I guess, like the moves that are available, the gameplay mechanics. But we're going along, and I want to say we're testing out the maps early in development in just like this VR walker mode where we had jumping, and we're like, oh, we can really like jump around these maps a lot in this VR walker mode. We need to try this in the game. So, we added jumping, and we put it out there to the few beta testers. And I want to say that I can't remember if we had jumping in it when we first had it in the PlayStation VR beta. We probably did, but maybe that was the only thing that we had. And everybody's like, oh yeah, I really like the jumping. And like really quickly, it was like, oh, well, this opens up a lot of different things in the gameplay, a lot of verticality that we didn't have before. Also opens up a ton of bugs, because next thing you know, somebody's jumping out of a map, and you gotta fix all that. We're like, yeah, the jumping's real cool. And we're like, and we talked to the beta testers, you guys think we should try and add, a slide? Well, yeah, let's try it. So we add a slide. Hey, what do you guys think if we slide around corners? Let's try it. We try it. People are loving it. Hey, well, let's try a prone. And yeah, let's try it. And it's like, we kept adding them, and 90% of the beta testers be like, yeah, this is fun. And we thought it was fun. And that's how we got to where our gameplay mechanics are right now, is just essentially, let's try it and see if it's fun. And if the consensus by the people that are playing is it is, we're going to go with it. That's how we got there.
Is it
Hell
fun?
Yeah,
what a great way to think about it. That's what we're all here for. We're here for fun. Play video games for fun. So I think you're onto something there.
Yeah.
Listening to the feedback of the players, I think that's something that sometimes gets lost when developing a game. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's finding that happy mix, right, Steve? I mean, you can't listen to everybody. Like, I mean, there's a lot of. I think there's some development teams that sometimes they go too far the other way and they try and appease everybody, and you just can't. But I think it's, it's smart. You got to have people that are listening, but you got to have, people that make decisions of what to listen to and what not to.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And I guess like initially when I got into this, I felt like as I had just been, a gamer, that I was like, oh yeah, well, my intuition's pretty good with this. And maybe at the beginning, I don't know, there became a point where like I felt like I turned from like into a gamer to a developer. And it's weird, like when you put ideas out there, like and you're trying to get the reception to them from players, like who do you listen to? Okay, well, if everybody's 50-50 on this, does that mean it's on me to make this decision? If we add this feature, do we add as an option? But by and large, if we try something, it's suggested and we try it and the people like it, and it's not going to totally change the game, we want to do it. And I still think jetpacks and flamethrowers are going to be great, so we'll get there one day.
All right, that's the fourth time you mentioned jetpacks and flamethrowers.
I tell you what, man, I tell you what,
serious.
I tell you what, it's because I remember I want to say it was on PlayStation 3, it was like the second it was one of the James Bond games that was on there, and it was just one-on-one. You'd play with your buddy, split console, and it was like an arena, and you had jetpacks. They didn't have flamethrowers, but going back and forth with another guy in a jetpack in an arena in that James Bond game just left such an impression on me.
I love it. It's a new kill streak. You get so many kills, you get a jetpack, and then you get so many kills, you get a flamethrower. Then you get both together. I want it.
I love it.
I've been holding this this thought since the beginning of this podcast, so I have to say it now. But isn't it, I don't know, now that you can play FPS in VR, and obviously it's been happening for a couple of years, in the future when everyone's playing mostly VR, people are going to say, you played like an FPS game on the computer? How does that even make sense? Like, what were you, like, what? You were just moving around with what? I don't get it. Like how kids now don't understand, like, how do you burn a CD? Like, what do you mean? That's exactly the kind of conversations that's going to happen in the near future, which is pretty funny to think about.
Burn a CD. How did you record on tape cassettes? Remember, Skiva? You had to put the tape.
Oh yeah, I remember.
You had to take a piece of tape and put it over the spot on the top of the cassette tape to record on it.
Yeah, if someone pushed the plastic out, so that little plastic tab you could pull out would make it so it was then like read only, right? That was like the read only mode. But I remember that stuff, man. I remember sitting there. I remember calling into a radio station requesting a song, and then sitting there all day till they played it, like with my finger on the record button. Man,
now you can have every song you want at the tip of your fingers.
Yeah,
like
all I gotta do is say it, and it's playing everywhere. It's insane. I love the future. It's amazing.
Steve, we got you back.
Yeah, sorry, my bad.
No
My
worries.
comment took him back to the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think somebody disagreed with me on jetpacks and flamethrowers.
They killed your feed, so like, no, you're out.
Well,
yeah,
we're just about there anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, so just kind of like button everything up. I mean, we talked about a lot tonight with ALVO, and I think, the thing that I take away from it is ALVO is far from done. So, I think if you tell us a little bit about the future of ALVO, what's going to happen. If you mentioned a few things, but if you want to reiterate them again, and just to let people know that if you haven't tried ALVO yet on any of the platforms, maybe it's time to go take a look or check or look for something coming in the future.
Yeah, so well, thank you for having me here. If I'm going to be wrapping it up and letting me talk about this, letting me talk about my baby, because she is my baby. It is my baby, and but basically the best version of ALVO is yet to come in our PlayStation VR2 and our Steam release. We are in the we've had it in a closed beta on PlayStation VR2 for, I don't know, maybe 2 months. And that's about, 6 months less than we were on PlayStation VR1. Thankfully, we had a lot more starting off in our PSVR2 beta. And we're, just about to get final approval on it from Sony. And we're hoping to announce our release date in the real near future here.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. And And it's going to look pretty. Obviously, you got all the mechanics involved that you didn't have on PSVR1 with the manual reload. The plan, yeah, so it's going to be on PSVR2. There's going to be a number of graphical upgrades right off the bat, and then we got some things in the pipeline shortly after release to continue to push the graphics on it. And we're also, in the late stages of getting it out on PCVR, where it's going to be on Steam, essentially, Rift, Vive, Index, and I want to say we're going to have it on the HP Reverb as well. Nice. It'll be cross-play over there with all the other headsets. The deal is, they all are going to be in the same maps, but the maps are going to look prettier, and everything's going to look a little bit better on the next gen, whatever hardware it may be. It'll be on Steam. We've got easy anti-cheat running on it on Steam, so everybody's concerned the Steam people are going to hack it. We've got all kinds of other stuff we're working on with it, but just what might be in the I'm just thinking about the things that are in the fairly short-term pipeline for it are the mods. The ability to mod it is going to come shortly after the Steam release. We're also having essentially, like, all the matches themselves are 10 players. We're basically adding the ability to have like an 11th quote player in there that is going to be a spectator, or people that want to, like if people want to have a league and have a spectator cam on it, that they can either have it controlled on a PC or control it, just in a headset and have like a drone flying around. There's going to be that. There's new maps. And that's it. And jetpacks and flamethrowers. That's it.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff.
I knew it was coming.
It's a lot of stuff.
I know there's more going on with it than that, but those are kind of the highlights of the things that are on my mind, other than everything that it takes to go in to get this game released on PlayStation VR2.
Well, I think it's a super good tease. Like, I think that everybody should keep their eyes out soon for an announcement, and I think you'll probably have I'm sure you'll have a full list of all the different things you have coming at that point, because I know you guys do. I mean, you guys work tirelessly. I mean, literally the work that you have put in on this game just since the PlayStation VR1 launch, and even just since the Quest launch, has been amazing, and that you continue to make it better and better. And again, you can tell when these things are passion projects for people, because they do want to continue. I mean, would have been very easy for you right now just to go, yep, we got our money back, let's just get out of here. But that's not the case. You want to continue to make it better. You want the community to thrive, and you're doing it, man.
Yep, we're trying. It ain't getting any easier, but it is getting a little better. It's getting a little better, and I'm hopeful that we're kind of. It's always like, I've always felt like got this, I guess, developed like a weird relationship with, not a weird relationship with, but obviously, like, I pay attention to all the media that's out there on it, and I want the big VR YouTubers and stuff to like cover it. But I think the fact that it had never been on PC VR, I think, kind of limited me with some of them. And then, within that PC VR crowd, we're a way latecomer to the game, where we weren't quite as much on Quest, and we certainly weren't on PlayStation VR1. And I'm hoping that the PSVR2 release, and then finally getting it out on Steam, is going to expose it to kind of what I would say is more of what I say is the VR elite, who for whatever reason, those opinions are very important to me, and any type of reception by that community, like that would mean a lot. So hopefully when some of those folks finally get their hands on it, they maybe see why our community members and a lot of our players are so passionate about it, because we really do have some passionate players, passionate community members, and God bless you guys. Without you, would not have happened, and it probably wouldn't continue to happen, because it's tough. It's tough. So
hell yeah, the community helps these things, especially multiplayer game. You can't do it without a community. You need people in there playing, and it's got a great player base still. Steve, I mean, there's always people in the lobby. There's never a time where you probably can't get a match. And
That's true, man.
that it's great as crossplay between Quest and PlayStation, and eventually Steam. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, it was always built. We were always everything we've done, at least for the longest time, and still is like under the assumption that okay, if we have a low player base, how do we make sure the game continues? Because I don't want people. They got to be able to play other players, and so the whole kind of the whole matching system and everything else. The game that's been a big part of the design is just keep players in the game, and it has worked to our advantage because I've seen a number of multiplayer games since we released, come and go, and they weren't keeping players in the game for whatever reason. And so thank you guys very much for having me, and all the folks that are watching this. I've watched this. I watch y'all's channels, and I see all the commenters, and I know it's a lot of the both YouTubers and the developers. And I know you as the YouTubers work incredibly hard. As somebody who's captured and edited a lot of footage, God bless y'all, because it is hard work. and capturing VR and developing for VR, I understand, is incredibly hard. And I know everybody out there is working at it, and most of them are in it because we see a financial future, but it is it's a passion, and it's such a small community, and it continues to be fun to be part of that community. So,
Steve, thank you so much for sharing your story. Now everybody knows that if they ever want to get into game development, always ×3 everything. The money you invest, the time you invest, and also the emotion that you invest. It is a lot, but very worth it according to Steve. So thank you so much. And also, I think you're definitely probably inspiring a lot of people.
Well, if you believe it, you can achieve it. God bless. We are Americans here, and we will make things happen. Along with our, just kidding. Sorry, that's me.
No.
Yeah. Well.
Absolutely. I think this has been an awesome episode, guys. This was we had a little bit of a break between our first episode and second episode just because we've been a little bit busy, but I think this was a great way to get back into it, and I thought it was great. Jazz, Steve,
really great story into the behind the scenes of VR, and really the people that build this industry, and the amount of heart and effort that it takes. Amazing.
It's a beautiful thing.
For sure.
I love VR.
Yeah.
I love being here with all of these people, and I love that there are passionate developers out there like yourself that are making awesome experiences for all of us. Appreciate you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad there's folks out there like y'all who are covering it, because that makes a big difference.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And make sure you play ALVO. Keep an eye on any of the news that are coming up, because there will be news coming up. And yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Guys, do us a favor. If you're not subscribed to this channel and you want to hear more, we have more coming. We're going to do some more in-depth stuff like you're seeing today. We want to bring in the heart and the passion of the VR community, and that's what we're going to be doing here on the Impact Reality Podcast. So come and check us out next time. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video if you liked it, or if you like this podcast. Hit the subscribe button, and make sure you hit the notification bell, because we're not going to be like every week, or we'll try and be like every other week. I don't know. What are we doing, guys?
We're going to try.
We're working on it. It's part of our passion.
Yeah.
We'll be here as much as we possibly can.
We are.
We're doing our best.
We do have Gamescom coming up that we'll be traveling overseas to. So that might take a hit on our next plane episode, but we will be back, and we will have some awesome stuff coming.
Yeah, and leave some comments in the chat afterwards. Let us know who you might want to see. Let us know who you might want us to bring in here, and we'll see if we can do it. We'll try and bring somebody in here. So if there's something you want to see, or somebody you want to see, or somebody you want to talk about, put it in the chat. We'll take a look at it afterwards, and we'll see if we can do it. And Steve, you rock, dude.
Right on.
Totally.
Let's go.
Right on. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.